Hello, welcome back everyone. We are going to the next element to discuss in this week 7 is the important chapters, stakeholder management, but we will also discuss resources management at the same time. Though the project resources, indeed the project resources management involves all the resources, human resources, any purchasing, procurement, deploying internal as well as external resources which are needed for delivering a project or for any program or set of projects, rather a portfolio. The resources we're going to talk before we talk about the stakeholder management, because the reason is resources management is important in any project successful execution and completion, because resources management focuses on priority usage of the right resources or key resources, and they need to be available when they are required, and then monitoring the utilization of resources with the optimum use of resources and achieving the right productivity with efficiency and effectiveness within the project executions when it is being planned out as per the estimated time and estimated budget. And again, measuring these resources effectively is one of the key responsibility of the project team and the project manager. So we're going to talk about resources management before we discuss the stakeholder management. When we say resources management in the project, we know that in project management resources are required to carry out any kind of project or the key tasks or the milestones or deliverables or the work package itself from the work breakdown structure. So the resources can be people, equipment, facilities, funding, or anything else that capable or make it able the project team or the project manager to fulfill the requirement for the completion of any project key or major or minor tasks. So that means resources or resource management is basically acquiring, allocating and managing the right resources within the project, such as individuals, experts and their skills, finances, technology, physical resources, equipment, machinery, material and natural resources that are required for any project that needs the right approach to be well managed, and the planning is done when during execution the resources are there at the nick of time when they are required. So resource or resources management ensures that internal and external resources are used both efficiently and effectively on time and within budget. So resource allocation is basically the process of assigning and scheduling available resources in the most efficient manner or effective way or economical manner, because project will always need some resources. So, but the problem is the resources we have, they are not we struggle with the resources. They're few in numbers. Let's say you need an expert, or you need a particular equipment, or a crane, or a lifter, or executor in construction project. For example, sometime what is required in construction, we say 5 M's. So of course we need money, M for money, M for manpower, M for machinery, and then M for material, and M for method. So that's quite important. 5 M's are required, fulfill the requirement for the resources in construction project. So the projects will always need these resources, but the resources are scarce. They are few, and there's always pressure with the resources to be available on a particular project in the particular nick of time. Whenever these resources are required to fulfill any task or major or minor task, the project manager is supposed to determine the proper timing for such resources to be available within the project schedule or estimated time. So the project management constraint, as we discussed earlier, we are having problem with whatever we're going to be doing in the planning. When we execute the project, we have to be properly managing, because one of the constraints, as we discussed, the fundamental, if the time is not properly estimated, time can be a serious challenge. Budget, the costing, and of course if the project is not in scope, and if it suffers from scope creep, then it will be like never ending story. So the project has to be definitely starting in a definite time and finish within the definite end time. And so how we can do it? Unless until the resources are not available, it will be a struggle and the project will be under pressure. So the iron triangle, the triple constraint or the quadruple constraint we discussed earlier, time is one of the key constraint when we have to make sure that the resources are available at that particular time. The definition of constraint is sometimes we know that imposes the limitation or restriction so that prevents something from occurring within the project. An example of constraint is basically we can think about how many hours are required in a particular day to complete a certain task, or for example any work package, or in a certain days of the week. So the threat or use of the force to prevent, restrict, or dictate that action to complete the work package in that particular time can become quite a limitation. For example, we know this iron triangle: time, scope, and cost. Though quality is another key constraint with the quadruple approach. So we need to, other than the four, sometimes use 6 key constraint or 6 important factors that has the issues from 3 to 6. And in this triangle illustration, you can see each side or point of the triangle basically represent the triple constraint: project management, scope, time. We know that the scope, time, and the cost are the 3 major constraints. However, resources itself, and then the quality and risk are the other 3 major fundamental constraints. So it makes 6 instead of 3 from the iron triangle. The fundamental plus these 3 resources, risk, and quality become quite fundamental constraint with the project management when we are dealing with the allocation of resources. So remember this 6 constraints, sometimes we call it crepe quest or BCQRST, so then you will not forget. So B is for budget, and we know that we going for the benefit sometime, and C be the cost. QRST is quality, risk, scope, and time. So then this is the sometime we use resources as well as the benefit of the project become 6 key fundamental constraints that you can think about. However, when we think about the resources, we know there are non-storable and storable. We divide them or split them in 2 main parts. So some resources can be reused or recycled, especially let's say material we have, and they remain there if they are not used, equipments for example. But there are some resources that are non-storable and you cannot keep it or renew it or reuse it. Let's say hours of somebody is there to work, and if that's not utilized, so the time is gone, then you cannot renew it or you cannot store it. So that's very important that we know the resources are both it can be storable or instorable. So the tangible or intangible, in other words, so the tangible or physical resources can be reused, or the intangible resources cannot be possibly used, maybe somebody's expertise or advice at that particular nick of time. So we know that the project management key challenges or key constraint we need to take in consideration when we want to do the resources management. So if you think, or if you remember when it happened in your own experience, when you were assigned a project with kind of unrealistic time or unrealistic budget, or maybe you have done some case studies that you have identified, or the project was suffering from, let's say, scope creep or unrealistic time estimation or cost or budgeting. So according to the PMI, the Project Management Institute, they describes project constraint as the general restrictions that limit the project or portfolio, for example. So simply anything that stop or put a limit on implementation of strategies of doing any part of the project key deliverables, we know that this is going to be a constraint. So when we think about the resources, so the first constraint or challenge is people itself. So we take the three-sphere model here. So the challenge is having the right people for the right job at the right time, and with their motivation and their optimistic approach. That is one of the most important challenge, how to deal with people, how to lead the project with the people in place with the right aptitude and attitude. That is one of the first challenge when we are dealing with a project. Second, when we are doing project, when executing, the governance of the project, the key processes, the SOPs, how we gonna be doing the for example, the protocols we have, the standard of procedures. So are we lacking any updated processes, the methodology we are taking on board to deliver the project or execute, the governance, the controlling, monitoring. So processes, they need to be updated, and we have to, as a project team or project manager, good control for the project execution and closure. But the third thing is more important, the key challenge. If you don't have the right tools and technique, the technology going to be quite risky if it is not relevant to the project, or you don't have the right competencies for the right people with the right skills, or the technology that you have adopted is not fit for purpose, or it is not the right one. So these are the three key challenges you can use as a three-sphere model to address the fundamental challenges in project management. What constraints exist within any project? We know people, of course, financial constraint, machinery, material. So we also think about, let's say, methods. That can be the methodology we use with Agile, with the right approach, Prince2 or waterfall. So as I say earlier, in construction we say, for example, 5 M's. So that is money, manpower, machinery, material, and method. Look into the video that we uploaded in the week 7 workshop. That will also give you more help that how we can get the best for resources to be managed appropriately to ensure the project will be achieved or completed successfully as per the estimated best. Again, depends on the estimation. That is the constraint with the time estimation, with the costing, and the scope is very, very important that a project is clear and precise in its scope with the key deliverables. And then we need to allocate and deploy the right resources, both tangible and intangible resources. That is very, very much, of course, is appropriate. That's why when we're talking in operation management, big data analytics, the information is a tangible resource, can be applied in the project delivery. When we have this in hand, help the project team and the project leader or the project manager to make the right decision at the right time. So that's why we need the business intelligence and real information in real time to be exchanged or disseminated. The aim of resources management or resource management is basically the process of planning to set the right target to hit, then scheduling, allocating resources in the best possible manner. It is again important that the resource management is the ultimate aim that we want to achieve from appropriate managing the resources, is to maximize our resources more appropriately in the more efficient manner. This in turn will help, this will in return help the project team to lead the project execution towards success, and that you can complete any goal or set objective or deliverables. So they optimize the allocation of specific resources to the project is one of the fundamental aim of resource management. In short and long term depend on the nature and the complexity of the project, and then through variation of demand is again two important objective that you want to achieve. So manage resources cost within acceptable limit is important aim of the resource management, and then balancing internal and external resources, because anything we hire or we outsource that needs they're gonna cost money, so we have to be more realistic to balance the use of those resources. Do we really need to be realistic to hire if we can have the resources in-house rather hiring from outside? And then develop the team capability and skill is very, very important. The key principle for effective resource management also include the accurate project requirements at the first place, then the right estimation and planning for any contingencies that should be done well in time, and then we have to allocate the team or deploy the resources to work at the best suited for assigned task with the right skills and capability. However, knowledge of the estimation for the time and cost, that is quite important, because we can apply then the prioritization methodology and then we execute the project accordingly. So provide the team with a challenging and engaging environment, keep them motivated to achieve their set objective or target. That is one of the key aim of the resources, to get the best out of the available resources. The optimum use of resources is the major aim or the key aim of the resource management within project. So when we are allocating resources, we have to see how the resources can be loaded. So resource loading can be also referred as, sometime we have to deal with the constraints. So resource scheduling or limit resource allocation, we see that the resource loading can be conveniently presented as in a graphical illustration. We sit together as a project team and then we see what resources we need over the time. This gives an indication of the demand of project will take place within the available organization resources. So loading is the assignment of work to an worker or machine or unit. So whatever resources we need, it can be human resources or other physical resources. So it has to be planned out well before time the project is executed. So this can be under loaded, full loaded, or overloaded, depend how you plan out the resources. So resource loading in a project management is basically the process of loading the employee's total available hours with the particular task or assignment. This can happen when anything happens. For example, if these unexpected responsibilities come up during the course of the project, then you can find out who will be available or what resources can be deployed urgently. So full loading may be theoretically preferred, but this is extremely difficult to do in real life. Unless in a mass of continuous operation, we can do it, but in project, you have to be careful that how you can load the resources with the number of hours to allocate. Overloading can lead to delays and wastage, creating bottlenecks sometime, because if you don't do the realistic approach with the resources and we don't do proper calculation for loading, for example, estimate all the work needed each day and divide by the resources full capacity, we know how many hours an worker can be deployed or allocated for particular part of the project task. So we know the realistic approach is 8 hours in a day somebody can be allocated. So how this individual resource can be loaded with the 8 hours time frame in a particular task to complete in number of hours or days. Alternatively, they estimate the work needed on the project task and divide by the resources available to do those particular tasks in the project. So we can then think about usually we take less than 8 hours for the resource to complete a particular task. So we need to understand if that is not properly managed, so overloading someone can delay the project, and that can become a serious bottleneck for the sequential activity to be waiting to carry on. So underloading also lead to the underutilization of resources on the other end, but also it can minimize cost delays. So we have to be careful to balance with the optimum use of resources. The resources constraint again is referred to the limitations of the resources available as input during the particular task to be performed by assigned resources at the same time. So we can just take an example that the resources we have, if this is the 3 key resources, so we need to know who, let's say if they are human resources, so we know their name and their particular expertise and what they are good for. So we think about their number of hours required, so we have to be very realistic, and then we know what is the job assigned to them. So if this is a graphic designer and that is his or her name, we know how many hours this resource is required in a particular time during the project, and this is the task or activity to perform, and this is what we believe can be done in the particular days during the project. So we divide or split the 5 hours in 3 and 2. This is just one example. This is how we load in our Gantt chart or in our the project management resource chart, where the resources are allocated to each task. So in this situation, if you accept to more work than you can handle per week or per day, so the constraint and resource constraint will always remain balanced. That is, this resource available 1 hour this day, 4 hours this the next day, or he or she is available only 2 hours this day or 3 hours the following day. So we have accordingly planned out the availability of the resources and then allocating the resources to complete particular task or subtask of the project. So we try to use an approach as a key technique. We call it resource smoothing. So resource smoothing is one of the project management key tool for resources management that is used in the resource optimization technique. It is basically defined as a technique that adjusts the activities of a schedule model so that all requirements for the resources do not go beyond the resources limit or limitations that already predefined during the planning phase. So we can schedule the resources in a particular day, and then we know how many resources will be required, and that is again a very important planning for resources management or resource management. So resource smoothing, also known as sometimes resource leveling, that determines the resource requirement so that these resources will be available at that particular nick of time when they are really required in the project execution time. So this resource smoothing allows activities to be scheduled with the smoothest possible transition. That's gonna help as the key rules to be applied. The smallest amount of slack, that is very important to ensure the tolerance level, the smallest duration, and the lowest ID number we can apply, the greatest number of the successor tasks, and then requiring the most out of the resources, which means that the resources are is used when the time constraint takes priority, for example. So we have to ensure that the resources of the project do not exceed certain predefined limit. It means we want to have a constrained resource used over the time as they are planned out. So these aspects align with the time management lecture we discussed the previous week, how we can estimate when we do critical path analysis and we put the list of activities in Gantt chart, and then we know the estimation for the time, and then deploy the resources to each major and minor task accordingly. Then we apply smoothing as well as leveling for the activities to be available for different tasks to perform in different days or during the project according to the project time plan. According to the project management body of knowledge, they define that resource smoothing as a technique that adjusts the activities of a schedule model such that the requirements for resources on the project do not exceed certain predefined limits. That's very, very important here. So we see create a project activity precedence table and network diagram, which we have done last week, and then you develop the resource loading table and a resource profile. So you know which activities can be performed one after the other or side by side. Then according to the nature of the activity, we can load the resources or we deploy the resources, and then we determine what will be the early or late finish for any particular activity. That is our, again, best time estimation to ensure that the project can be completed in the fastest possible time, or the maximum time that can be allocated without any delays. So we identify resources with over allocation, and then we try to smooth them. We level the resources, loading the table in the Gantt chart, and then we recalculate net activities for slack or for float, and then project if there is any chances or there's a constraint for the delays. We have to ensure that all the care is taken, and then the resources are already been leveled, and this is a technique which is applied. It means we want to have the constrained resource usage or resource profile over the time. We know what is slack and what exactly we mean by float. So in a critical network, we discuss any activity with a zero tolerance. We need to deploy resources as a product to prioritize that activity, because there is a zero tolerance. Delaying that activity means the whole project will be delayed. So slack is the amount of time that a particular task can be delayed without causing delays to subsequent task or the overall project completion date. If this is a tolerance level is available, that is where we have the tolerance or we have the flexibility. Otherwise, if it is zero, it's critical. In context of the project to revamp or a website, let's take an example. The task of finalizing a logo can be delayed as a quality assurance. So the proposed next step will have to wait until the website has fully coded. So that is how we do the activities to deploy resources accordingly instead of just delaying the overall project. By contrast, coding may have a little slack as the next step requires in this project the task to be finished, and coding may be forecast to take longer than the other parallel tasks that can continue. However, if you see, this is very important to note that what already covered in the last section for time management, when we do the decomposition of the project, we break down. In project management, we know float or slack is amount of time that a task in a project network can be delayed without causing a delay to the subsequent task or the project completion date. But it can depend if the float is non-zero. Then we have to identify the path with the critical elements or non-critical. So putting simply, the project management float is basically the amount of time a given task can be delayed without causing a delay in the entire project, and that's why how we can apply the resources to be deployed. So creating a network diagram, we know this is what we have learned in the previous two lectures. We get the activity to be completed with our best estimation from end to end. We do forward pass, backward pass, and we find out activity with zero tolerance or the activity which has float non-zero, and there we have the level for the float. So your resources need to be deployed effectively, efficiently, and economically. So we have already discussed these activities, and we allocated the task. We have two different resources available. We done our best estimation with the time, we finding out what is slack. If there is any activity with the tolerance level, we can then do the leveling for the activity to ensure that this table will give us the clear identification of the activities with zero tolerance. So then we can deploy the resources and we can prioritize the deployment of the resources accordingly. So we have to see that how to then when assign the deploying the resources to different activities, here we can ensure that the particular activity can be performed at the same time when we have to label this activity, and that is again important in the project successful completion. So communicating with each stakeholders in the right way can play a vital part in keeping them on board. So we need to talk about more about stakeholders, how the project manager can look after stakeholders, and we know this is a process. We need to identify who are the internal or external stakeholders, how we analyze the stakeholders, their influence and their power or their interest in the project, how to communicate with them, and then how to engage stakeholders are some of the important activities that we have to do within stakeholder management. So when we ask the question, what is stakeholder? We know stakeholder has a quite interest, anyone who has direct or indirect interest in the project, or who can affect or can be affected by the project. So a stakeholder is an individual, group, or organization that is impacted by the outcome of the project is a stakeholder. Stakeholders have an interest in the success of the project and can be within or outside the organization that is sponsoring the project. So stakeholder can have positive or sometimes negative influence on the project. So engaging in the right people, with the right people in the right way in project management is one of the fundamental important part which we call stakeholder management. So typically the stakeholders are sometimes sponsors, they are the owners, investors, the employees of the organizations, key clients, even the contractors, suppliers, general communities, for example, legislative bodies, government bodies, and trade association, media, general public. Maybe they have interest in the project, so they become stakeholders. It is quite important for the project manager and the project team. So the project manager has the responsibility to manage the stakeholders and even to influence key stakeholders' expectations as well as to meet their requirements. Because why this is important, the stakeholders, if they are not happy, end of the day, even if you complete the project on time, within budget, it is a failure. The project can only be successful if the stakeholder accept it and they're happy with the project. That is a project success. It will lead to a project success. So project management knowledge area, this is the important from the body of knowledge. For example, the PMI, they have already developed this framework as the fundamental areas to integrate, or the project integration management is one of the key skills. So we need to know what is the need and expectations of the stakeholders. So that is one of the fundamental skill to facilitate any project. However, in these 10 knowledge areas for any project management, along with the stakeholder management, the fundamental core knowledge area includes scope, time, cost, and quality. That's the iron triangle fundamental elements of any project. So we need to know what is the key deliverables, the objective and available resources, how the project can achieve in real life with smart objective in place, time, realistic calculation, budget estimation, and the quality agreed standard to achieve. Then the facilitating knowledge area include human resource management, knowledge management, risk management, procurement, and stakeholder management. When we have this set of these 10 knowledge areas, we apply some tools and technique. For example, work breakdown structure, we use unvalue management, critical path analysis or critical path method, Gantt chart, and so on and so forth. And we have the portfolio of number of project, and each project, if it's completed successfully, that is the success of the program or portfolio, and that lead toward the enterprise success. So the reason that the body of knowledge of the let's say from PMI, they develop this project management body of knowledge, which is a set of standard terminologies and guidelines for project management to publish and again to update the Project Management Institute. The book they have as a project management body of knowledge guide. But as reflected in this model of knowledge areas, this is realized that the stakeholder management to meet their need and expectations as a facilitating one of the most important or crucial element is the knowledge area which is important in the overall framework of this body of knowledge. We can say the project management guide. So you can see here that the stakeholder management, anyone who looks for your project that results, you're looking for your project's results, the drivers, who gonna drive what, who will do the work, team, who can help you to succeed. So who you have in your stakeholders: primary, internal, external, secondary, interest group, anybody who observe your project, who does not want this project to bring any kind of change. There may be people they oppose. So there's a different group of stakeholders. Some of you will be the key team members. They drive the project, key deliverables, or they become team leaders. Some of them are just the people, they support you financially or otherwise. And other people, they will be just like community to observe. But there will be people, they ruin the day, or they can oppose, and they will create challenges. We need to be careful how to communicate and coordinate with different stakeholders in different time of the project. So stakeholder manager, or this, sometime in a big project we have a leader, or in the organization even we have a manager as a stakeholder manager. So we assign this duty as a project manager. In a small project, a project manager can handle him or herself, but if the project is quite of size and complex nature, then sometimes we have a team to do stakeholder management by its own. So stakeholder management involves the key identification of the primary and secondary or internal and external stakeholders, including the project team, the end users, the client, government agencies, sponsors, or the owner of the project, and all the important organization, particularly the parent organization and contractor and key suppliers. So internal stakeholder include the senior management, accountant, other functional managers, project team members, for example. Once we know who are the internal key stakeholders, we can then looking after them is important, because project management involves the identification of stakeholder analysis, and not just identification but analyzing of this identified stakeholders to meet their need and expectation is quite important. We know this is again an appropriate way to manage not just internal but external stakeholder. So you have clients, competitors, media, suppliers, environmental, political, consumer, and other intervener groups. They are interested directly or indirectly, or they can be affecting the project or impacted by the project. So we take them as a key stakeholders. So we need to find out that how we manage stakeholders. Who are the key stakeholders for a particular project? So you need to work within the organization, or they are the external people. Who are these key stakeholders, and what is their interest in the project? Do they exist within the community, or they are having any capability or ability to operate? How much impact they have on the project? So we need to know their interest as well as their influence, and how is their attitude toward the project. So we need to know if they can give us a favor, or if you have to look after their coordination, and how will the process of engagement be managed properly? How do you plan to involve stakeholder in your project operation during execution? So we need to understand that the stakeholder management plan is important to be in place. So we do, let's say we have a production manager, we have the production operatives. So what is the key goals given to them? What is the past reaction expectations, impact, both positive and negative, and the future expectations, and what exactly is the idea to ensure the support. So that's quite important to illustrate and identify that how the stakeholder refer to the regular exchange of information between within the identified list of stakeholders. So we need, after identification of stakeholders, to analyze them. So how we analyze, use the matrix. We need to know how high or low is the power or interest or influence. If it is a very high on the right top grid of the metric, so these stakeholders need to be managed very closely, because they are influential, they are powerful, and they are very much interested in the particular project. So these are your key stakeholders. However, if they are powerful but they have low interest, you still need to keep them satisfied. Maybe they are sponsors and they are lending you money for the project, so you need to make sure to have a close coordination with them. And someone who's very much interested but they have low power, but these group of people still need to be managed, even if they have a low interest and low power, let's say the general public or community, they cannot be ignored as a key stakeholder to analyze who are they, and then you can look after them accordingly among the list of all identified stakeholders. So once we have stakeholder management cycle in project, we are basically trying to understand how the project management team process this whole cycle. Look into the provided video which gonna help you the stakeholder management. You need to identify who are the key stakeholders. You gather the information about their interest and impact, and then what the stakeholder wants to get out from the project, and what is you have to monitor, and you have to communicate and coordinate with the stakeholders, and then again you have to update the log for implementing and then upgrading the strategy for the stakeholder management plan. Stakeholder communication is again important because it refers to the regular exchange of information between company and its stakeholders. For effective targeted stakeholder communication, it is important to know who the stakeholders are and what their goals, motives, and attitude are. So once you find out, then you can put in place effective communication plan, and you can have the answer for WH questions, whom you have to communicate, how frequently, and what will be the medium of communication. And that is very, very important to put again in place the communication plan. And then you can create again a log or register for communication. You know who are the key stakeholders, their priorities, and then you can communicate with them, the timing or mean of communication, of medium of communication. So you can create this kind of a tabular register or log to ensure that you are looking after all the stakeholder. So in its simplest form, a stakeholder communication plan basically outline who need to communicate with about what, and how you are going to do it, and how often you need to do it. It is not a marketing plan which would help you to define new product or services to offer to your audience, how you would go about promoting this product. In stakeholder communication plan, typically it grows out the information and finding in the management plan. It should list the key stakeholders who need to receive certain information and how you're going to communicate, including the type of mean of communication, the frequency, and the detail. So communication planning develop sharing and maintaining a stakeholder engagement strategy and communication plan throughout the project life cycle. Please continue your discussion looking into the article, the Stakeholder Management on Project. Read this online article about the how in the COVID-19 pandemic has further increased the challenge for stakeholder management on project. So share your thoughts and ideas accordingly, and read the chapters from your book, and also look to the Harvey Miller book. But if you have time, and you can download or you can go online to the library, Pinto book is also very, very helpful, the chapter for stakeholder management. I hope this is clear for this week, but we will discuss further in your workshop, and wish you all the best for this week, and we'll meet again in the next session.